So we talked about Cronbach's alpha and the reliability of a scale. However, a reliable scale is not always accurate. So remember, scale validity is how accurate a scale is. And just because a scale is reliable doesn't mean it's accurate, doesn't mean it's valid, but we do need to have a reliable scale for it to be valid. So reliability is kind of the first step, and then showing that it's actually valid is kind of the second step. So a test could be consistent, it could measure the same thing consistently, it's measuring something, but it could be not valid and it could be measuring something consistently, but not measuring what you really want it to measure. It's measuring something else that's not really related to your construct, or it's kind of only mildly related to your construct. And to determine scale validity, it's really hard to know if your scale is really valid or not with 100% confidence. But we can collect evidence for validity. So we'll never really know if the scale is valid. But we can collect evidence to assert that it is valid or not. So one way is to just read the items to determine the validity. And when you're reading items, you can consider two types of validity. Face validity is the first one, and that just means the items seem to be related to the construct. So there's no random items that are unrelated to the construct. So maybe you're asking about self-esteem, and that's your construct, and you ask people if you like dogs. Like that would be something that's not face valid, because liking dogs isn't really asking about someone's self-esteem. So that would be an example of when an item is not face valid. But I am a person of worth seems face valid because it seems like it is measuring self-esteem by just reading it. Content validity is the second type you can consider, and that means that items seem to cover all aspects or all areas of the contract, so you're not missing anything important. So content validity means you're covering everything in that contract and you're not being too narrow in your items. So when you think of content validity, think of a tent. You're covering all aspects of that construct and not just a very narrow part of it. So, for example, you want to know if someone likes their job. You want to know if they have high job satisfaction. If you're only asking about their boss, items about their boss, you aren't really getting an overall sense of their job satisfaction. You're just knowing if they like their boss or not. That plays a big part of your job satisfaction, but other things also play a role. So your coworkers, what field you're in, do you enjoy it, things like that also influence your job satisfaction, not just if you like your boss or not. So if you had items just about your boss, but you want to have a scale about overall job satisfaction, then that wouldn't be a scale that's content valid because it's not covering all aspects of that contract that you're trying to measure. Another way to collect evidence for validity is to correlate your scale with other measures. And you can have convergent validity. Convergent validity is when your scale scores correlate with measures for related contracts. So for example, self-esteem should be correlated with confidence at school. So the two constructs of self-esteem and confidence at school in theory should be related to each other. So if you have a higher sense of self-worth, then you'll have more confidence at school. So the measures of those two should be correlated with each other. Now don't mix the measures with the actual construct, right? A construct is more of a theoretical thing, and the measures are more of a concrete thing, and they're trying to get at the construct, but they're not 100% accurate. But we want to see if they're at least somewhat accurate, and by correlating them to, that's kind of evidence of validity for your scales. Then you can have divergent validity, and that means that scale scores are not highly correlated with measures that should be unrelated. So for example, self-esteem should not be too highly correlated with intelligence. Now, yes, intelligence might affect your self-esteem. So if you're really smart, maybe you have higher self-esteem. But that's not the only thing that affects your self-esteem. So a lot of other things affect your self-esteem. So if you have a correlation of 0.8 between self-esteem and intelligence, that might be a bad thing. You might not be measuring two separate things. You might just be measuring the same thing in a different way. So those correlations are kind of acceptable Cronbach alpha coefficients, right? And so if it's correlated at 0.8, then you're like, well, okay, maybe I'm not really measuring self-esteem. I'm just really measuring intelligence again, but just in a different way. So when you're creating a scale, it's really a good idea to, one, read the items and make sure they have face validity and content validity, but also that they kind of correlate with things that they should, and have convergent validity and not be highly correlated with things that they shouldn't be, and have divergent validity.